cold in my office today.
Yes. Okay, people are just coming in. We're going to get going in 1 minute, not even a minute, 10 seconds. There we go. Okay, folks, welcome to the Media Matters webinar. Today, I'm very excited to have our special guest, TV journalist and news anchor, Tess Van Straten, who's a veteran TV journalist, has worked in media for more than, 25 years, something like that, a long time.
Started when I was 12.
Started when she was 12. Tess, you've interviewed rock royalty, you've interviewed actual royalty, you've interviewed, 4 Canadian prime ministers, you've been, like I said, on TV forever, and fun fact, Tess is also the luckiest woman in the world because she's married to me. That's how we got her. So welcome. Very appreciate you taking the time, helping me out. What's really fun about being married to a professional TV presenter is that you get to get feedback on your webinar presentation skills immediately after the webinar. It's really awesome. Or, hey, when you do conference talks, you get immediate feedback on all the ums and ahs and all the poor presentation skills.
You're so lucky.
I'm so lucky. Anyway, this is an exciting talk, and I think this is an area that's underutilized by a lot of schools. And so anyway, Tess, why don't we get started on it? I'm going to pepper you with questions as we go through this. There's a lot of power in media, though. So you, on a normal day of work for you, you're in front of, 50 to 80,000 people?
That's just on each newscast, and then the website, millions of views over the course of a year. So right. Lots of potential reach, and social media as well. So it's not just the TV newscast anymore, it's all the platforms where you can reach people.
And you've seen firsthand, because so in the market we live in Victoria, it's about the broadcasting area is about a little under 1 million people, roughly.
Well, we also broadcast into Vancouver, so really our broadcast area is about 4 to 5 million people.
Okay, so big broadcast area, but in terms of like a local sort of a hub of community, the TV station that you work for, Check News, we've both seen firsthand the impact that has on local kind of events, local businesses. When you get on the news, it makes a huge impact to the regional businesses. And it's kind of, in a digital world, it's kind of the last place for like local. Is that fair?
It's huge for people. You can get national and international news anywhere. It's on your phone, it's everywhere. But to get truly local news, you have to follow either a local newspaper, local TV station, local radio station to get that content. And that's what impacts people the most, what's happening in their backyard and their neighborhood. And just an example of the power of the media. We had a story on the weekend about a woman who has a rare form of diabetes, needs this special spray drug for it, and there's been a shortage, there's been a manufacturing issue. So there's a shortage, she's about to run out, she can't get it anywhere, and she will die without this drug. So she basically has a month left unless she can find this drug. So she came to us, we did a story, and then our viewers overwhelmingly responded because people had some of it they could share with her. And then by yesterday, our provincial health minister said they will get her this medication from the US so that she doesn't die. So that's truly the power of media.
Sure, influencing policy at a local level. Great. To me, that's why I'm kind of excited to hear you to talk about this today, because most of the schools we work with, they're regional, right? They're pillars of their community, and leveraging local media is kind of an underused, underleveraged asset. So before we get going, and before I forget, there's going to be a Q&A at the end, but what we thought would be fun is in the chat, if you want to put, so the question is, have you ever been on TV? And if so, for what? If you want to just put it in the chat while we get going on this talk, that would be fun. There we go.
And if there's questions as we go, you can put that in the chat as well. And then Shane can bring them up to me as well. So we can answer questions as we go as well, if it's related to one of the slides.
Awesome. Okay, well, why don't we kick this thing off?
Let's get started. So we're going to go over what's newsworthy, which is important, how the media works, which people don't always understand. So it's good to know how the media works, and different media work in different ways. So print or radio or television will have different needs depending on who they are, how to get coverage, which is usually the biggest hurdle, but it might be easier than you think, particularly if you have a local community newspaper or if you're in a smaller market with a smaller TV station. And of course, radio stations are easier to get coverage on as well. And then some interview tips and tricks, as well as how you can become your own reporter to promote your schools on your social media channels. All you need is a phone at this point, and we can go over some of things to keep in mind about taking videos and photos so that you can get more traction for your online presence as well. So media do's and don'ts, also important. So we're always in search of great stories, exciting things, stories that impact people, moving parts. Meeting is not an exciting story. So we're always trying to find things that really resonate with people and make good content. Now, especially for TV, we need it to be really visual, and it needs to be exciting. And for print, we need to have good photos or action shots. So news really falls into three categories. Of course, hard news, the situation in Iran right now, that is the hard news that usually leads newscasts and that will get covered no matter what. That breaking news could be a water main break, it could be a pileup. And then the human interest or softer stories. Those are the stories I like because those are the stories that usually matter the most to people, and that people really can get emotional about or resonate with. And then the bizarre. I have covered a story about a skydiving wiener dog, believe it or not. His name was Brutus, and he was doing the air show circuit in North America. So I had an exclusive interview with Brutus, the skydiving wiener dog, and that story actually made it to CNN as their top pick for the day and went all across North America because it was so bizarre. Wow. So bizarre stories always get interest.
And Tess, one thing that's I think important here is that for local media, what they prioritize is kind of top stories to differentiate from national media, or things that are local. Like that's the lens in which you're looking at things. Like what's the local impact? How does that affect us, the people in our constituency? Is that right?
And also the local reaction to the big story. So of course, over the weekend, Iran is the big story. We were talking to local Iranians here, how they feel about it, as they talk to people back home, what they would like to see happen. So we find a way to localize it. So it's not just this big story in a faraway place that people might not think impacts us. We find a way to find people here who it impacts and tell the story that way. So there's always a way to find a local connection to a story. The trade shortage, that's an easy way for schools potentially to get coverage for trade schools. If there's a shortage of plumbers or electricians, then you could offer up help in that way, and that helps localize sort of a national problem or issue. Healthcare is another way to localize it, telling the story of someone who's been successful through something, or some new research has helped that person, or drug therapy, ways to find that the big story, but to make it local. We will get emails from universities and colleges saying, hey, we have experts on these things. So whatever's happening on the big picture, national or world stage, there's a way to talk to someone locally about it. So that's something, depending on what your program is, that could potentially be a way to get coverage, proactively reaching out to the media that way. But for the most part, we're telling stories about our local community, people here, things that matter here and impact the most people here. Obviously, we have a pretty small Iranian community here, so it's not impacting as many people as, say, healthcare shortages and ER wait times are impacting everybody here.
But all media is trying to make a local connection, which is one of the opportunities. And you'll get into it more, but the more we make it easier for the journalists to do their job, the more likely they are to kind of use us. Anyway.
And we want to talk to real people, right? So we can have an expert, but we always try to sort of focus the story around a real person because people will identify with that person. So maybe it's one of your nursing students, or maybe it's somebody who you've been doing research on something, they've been in that study and it's helped them. We would start the story with this person because of this, is now these good things are happening, or it could be these bad things are happening because of something. And then experts weigh in, but we really want that personalized part of the story. I worked on Parliament Hill, which is our equivalent of Capitol Hill in Ottawa, the nation's capital in Canada, and CTV, one of the news networks, for their national newscast, would not cover any political story unless they had a real person impacted it in some way. They would have producers chasing all day to find that real person. So if there's a way to offer up more than one person to tell the story in a way that will resonate with people, that's important too.
Okay. So that's how schools could tie into hard news and
Yeah.
help them regionalize it in a way.
Yeah. So if there's a nursing shortage, you could offer up a nursing student or a LPN who could potentially, help. She's getting these skills at your school to help address the shortage. And here's the great things the school's doing to help address the shortage of workers in whatever field it might be. But having that real person taking part as well as an official from the school will really hand media a story. And newsrooms are more crunched than ever before. Lots have been scaled back. So the easier you can make it for us, the more likely you're going to get coverage on something.
Interesting. Okay, let's carry on.
Yeah, so the hard news, which really I don't think would come into play very much for schools in this context, but it's good to know the hard news always takes precedence, and that's usually what leads newscasts. The bizarre, so the novelty, the funny, the thief who's breaking into a building and falls through the ceiling and police catch him because of that. Those kind of stories also resonate with people, and those are the water cooler stories that people talk about. Brutus, the skydiving wiener dog, the family pet who saves the drowning girl. Those are the stories people share the most and usually find the most interesting. And then the human interest stories, and it can be a wide range from light to serious. It could be medical breakthroughs. It could be a new welding program to help address a shortage. It could be so many different things. It has to interest people and affect people, and it really needs to stand out from the other softer stories because, of course, we have to cover the hard news, and it goes down like this in an inverted triangle to there's only this much room for the softer content. For years, I've done a community feature about people making a difference, volunteers, nonprofits making a difference, and I get way more people sending me submissions for potential stories than I can actually cover in my one slot a week I have for that segment. Usually in a newscast, there's maybe one slot for that. In a paper, a community paper, you're going to be more likely to have those special interest stories. So there's much more room to get coverage in those smaller community papers that tend to focus more on positive things happening instead of the breaking news that the big papers do.
Great. Well, so help us understand how do we get covered, right? Oh, great. Here we go. So observing how your business works has been interesting since we've been together, right? And so it's amazing to me that so all the journalists come in the morning and they got to pitch a couple of ideas every day, right, for TV, and then that gets filtered through, and then stories get assigned, and then things happen really quickly during the day. So how does you talk about coverage, but if you could also touch on, okay, how does somebody get into your world so then when you've got a story you have to create in a day, you're thinking, oh, I know a guy or I know a gal over here that I can reach out to that can help me get this done?
Well, all media have all email addresses are online now. So there'll be a main news tips or newsroom email that you can reach out to. Radio stations will have an email. So you can proactively send an email there. The best time to send an email is sort of first thing in the morning. So it'll get seen when coverage is being decided. Usually most decisions are made by about 9 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes you could send it the night before. If you send something too far in advance, it just gets buried. We get hundreds of emails a day. So it's just going to get buried if you send it too far in advance. And we're really not thinking about next week. We're thinking about what's today, maybe what's tomorrow. If it's an early morning thing, we'd like to know the day before. But other than that, really same day decisions are being made and sometimes shifting within the day as well. It's really great if you can develop a relationship with a journalist in your community, because I'm more likely to push forward stories if someone emails me directly. I will then send to our producers if I think it's a good story, and that's much more likely to get coverage than just blindly sending something into an email tips box hoping that somebody takes interest in us. So that's another tip. And then it's how it affects people, right? Are people going to find it interesting? Is it going to matter to people? If it's super, super niche, it's probably not going to get coverage. We do a lot of stories on the housing market here in Victoria because we have one of the most expensive housing markets in the country and there's a housing shortage. So that's something that's affecting people on a daily basis. So different ways to tell that story, that's another way to get coverage. If you can think of more creative ways that you might be able to help tell a story that's an ongoing problem or issue. And then dull stories do not sell. we get so many people, oh, we're having a meeting. We're going to be, you know, in this really great gray meeting room with no windows and it's ugly and there's white walls and desks. That's not how they sell it, but that's what it's going to look like on TV. A bunch of people just sitting in a meeting room watching a PowerPoint isn't exciting TV. So even if something very exciting is happening at that meeting, it's thinking about a way that, well, how do we tell this story that's not sitting in this boring room? So conferences, workshops, usually very boring. There might be a keynote speaker who's at something, or you might have someone coming to your school who might be of interest. People may not want to just shoot that. They might want to, oh, can we get a one-on-one with this? Maybe it's a famous person, or maybe it's someone who has an interesting story. Could we get an interview with them? Could we set something up beforehand so we can get them outside doing something so it's not as boring? And then all of the schools that have really interactive things, if they're working with technology or health equipment, trade schools, welding, that's a very visual thing. Our government here, whenever they announce new funding, always pick welding and go and they pick a student to see them welding, and then they do an interview and the school does an interview. But our government is very pro trades because we have a shortage. So they're actually helping to promote trade schools here, unlike what I've seen on the other side of the border in the US, unfortunately. The government doesn't do a good job of promoting.
Well, yeah, in fairness, that's changing quite a bit. There's a lot, the trade schools are kind of having their day in the sun right now. So there's lots of opportunity.
Definitely lots of opportunity. And that's another way to go. So if maybe it's your state government, or it could even be your municipal government, you could make connections, which you probably already have with a lot of those people, to be like, hey, if you want to do an announcement, come to our school. We're happy to do it here. We can get students. We can get whatever you need. The easier you are and the more helpful you are, the more likely that the politician is going to want to come there because you're going to have everything ready to go. And the more likely you'll get media coverage because you've been picked as a location for this announcement. So that's another way to develop those contacts to get coverage. And there's lots of great stories that are an amazing story, but it doesn't sound exciting. People bury the lead. It's way at the bottom of what makes it interesting. We get these big, long emails from people, and usually we'll read the first paragraph. Maybe if we're not gripped, we move on. Sometimes I only read the subject line of the email to decide if I'm going to open the email. So,
well,
to make that subject line really catchy and interesting. And not, we also get a lot of emails where people just attach a Word document as a release, and the subject line just says media release. We don't know who it is. It's not coming from police or an organization. We know this person. I'm not likely to open that attachment because I don't know what's in it. It could be spam. It could be some kind of spyware. Usually it's not, but I'm less likely to open it if you haven't even gone to the effort of putting something in the subject line and then copying your body of your release into the email so we don't have to open attachments. That's one more step, and that's one more block you're going to get if people have to take more steps to find out what you think is a great story.
So, okay, so I think there's two things to unpack here, and I really want to stress these points. One, it's worth trying to build relationships both with individual journalists and the general tips lines, because the journalists, you got to file a story every day. Day starts at 9-ish with the assignment meeting, right? And things get pitched, and then it's okay, go. And that story needs to be uncovered, videotaped, submitted to editing by 3 p.m. maybe?
3 to 3:30 for if you have a 5 o'clock TV newscast. Yeah. 3 to 3:30, 6 o'clock a little bit later, but most stations have a 5 and 6, so you have to be ready.
A 4 to 5 hour window for that journalist to go figure out what it is, figure out if it is even a story, write it, shoot it, write it, make it into something in order to make the newscast at 5, right?
Find people to interview. And so often, especially in TV, a story will be failing. Print's easier because people can just phone people, get information off the record and write it. The TV, we have to convince someone to talk to us on camera, which lots of people kind of go, oh, I don't want to do that. Even though it's such great promotion and publicity, free promotion and free publicity. So it's a hustle. We might get assigned at 9 or 9:30. You have to find people to interview, turn it around, figure out what's happening, condense it down, condense 5-minute long interviews from maybe 2 or 3 different people down to this very concise 2-minute or shorter news story. And then, edit it, make sure you have video for it. So it's a hustle. And if a story's not going anywhere by late morning or midday, it'll be like, okay, we're switching you, go do this instead. And so that thing we have to switch to needs to be pretty easy to pull off to get it
Yeah,
done
because now
in shorter
you
time.
got 2 hours to do it instead of
Yeah,
5. So one of the lessons in this is that if you want to get coverage, and you do get a bite from a media person, you need to prioritize it around what their needs are, not yours. Because this is like fish on the counter. Like this is expiring by the minute, the opportunity.
that's a really good way of putting it. So I will have people say, oh, okay, so would tomorrow work? Or maybe we could do it Thursday. And it's like, I'm calling you for a news story, unless it's a feature in-depth report from a magazine or newspaper, something that sort of lots of lead time on. We're usually calling you for same day. Yes, we're calling you for today. And the people who say, sure, what do you need? Absolutely. What time? Okay, yep, come now, or come in an hour, or great, the earlier the better. Don't say, oh, does 4 o'clock work? Because that's never going to work for us. And also don't hold events at 4 o'clock, because it's really hard to get coverage at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock when we're getting a newscast to air, or we're on the air and everyone's tied up in editing, and we might have one camera left who's left for breaking news. So we're
Yeah,
probably not going to send that person to a media event unless it's a really big deal.
right.
And then it's
So
really, you're not going to get the airtime you would get if you had your media event in the morning or by lunchtime.
So press releases should be sent out in the morning. You're going to show, I know you're going to show an
Yeah,
example in a sec, but like morning, like between 8 and 8:30 is probably good because it has a chance of being in the upper end of the hundreds, literally hundreds of releases that have come in.
I would send it a bit earlier than that. Usually an assignment editor starting at 7, newspapers will
Okay.
start earlier. So it's good for them to get it on their radar first, before reporters usually start between that sort of 8 and 9:30 range, depending on what type of station or outlet it is.
Okay.
But you can send it the day before, but then send it again. Don't assume if you sent it yesterday, we're going to remember it or see it. It's going to be buried at that point unless it really caught our attention. Send it again, but don't email us, every day for 2 weeks leading up to an event, because that's just going to irritate people and
Yeah.
be less likely to get coverage.
And there's a 3:30 deadline, and a lot of stuff has to happen before that 3:30 deadline. So if you expect somebody, if you want a TV camera to show up on your campus, like noon would be a good time to hold an event. Is that?
Yeah, anytime in the morning, usually after 9 is good. Every newsroom is different for TV, and so cameras will start at different times. For print, photographers will start at different times, but generally sort of between 9 and 1 is safe, because there's going to be someone on and working.
And there's also a battle for resources amongst the reporters because you've got a finite amount of TV cameras or like photographers or videographers to show up. So that becomes a bit of jostling internally as well.
Yeah, a lot of TV stations now have what we call VJs, or video journalists. So they do it all. They have to shoot their story, they write their story, they edit their story. They're the reporter and cameraman in one. A lot of outlets have gone to that to save money. So there's some legacy reporters left, or there will be some cases where there is a reporter and a cameraman. I get a cameraman, but most of our reporters now shoot their own stories, which makes it even tighter for them, because when I'm in the car with the cameraman, I can be replying to emails, calling people, thinking about my story, writing something. When we get back, someone's editing my story. I can be writing my story, pulling clips. The editor can start looking at the footage. I don't have to worry about that. Well, they edit the story. I can do my web post. So for the person who's a one-man band and does it all, their day is even more compressed, and the easier it is for them. We call it one-stop shopping, where if they can go somewhere and everything they need, there's 2 to 3 interviews and all the visuals they need at one location, it's going to make their day much easier and make it more likely they'll get covered. For a human interest story in particular, hard news stories are different, but a human interest story, I had someone where they're like, oh yeah, why don't you, it was a nonprofit thrift store, why don't you come to, we'll do the interviews, it was going to be 45 minutes away to do the interviews, and then you can come downtown to our thrift store and shoot shots of the store. And I'm like, I don't have the camera time to drive, do the 45 minutes of the interview, do that one interview, then drive 45 minutes down to the store. It was because their CEO had a board meeting. I said, well, can someone else do the interview, or wasn't even an important board meeting, she just had a meeting. Like, could you shift this? Because there's no way we're going to spend an hour and a half driving for a human interest story for 2 interviews at different locations.
So this is very similar to marketing in that you need to make it easy for the customer. And in the case of, from the school's perspective, the media is the customer, right? You're the customer. Because I want you to showcase me. I need to make your life as easy as possible and be as accommodating as possible in order to build that relationship. And if I can get on TV, I'm also more likely to get on TV later because I'm now in your world and you know that, hey, Shane's easy to deal with. This story I think he could help with. I'll call on that guy, and then that's how you consistently get coverage.
Yeah. So we are a big university here. It's very difficult to deal with. They have, I think, 15 people in their media department. You'd think that would make them better. But every time they seem put out that we want to talk to someone that day, and then they will say, yeah, sure, it should be fine. And then we don't hear back from them. 4 different people will email us. And then at 2:00, oh, sorry, we couldn't find anyone. Well, you told me you were going to, and then you didn't. Where we have a community college here who I think they have 1 person in their media department. We can also email instructors directly and they respond immediately. They're like, what do you need? No problem. Great. And that's who we call, because why would we go this other route and waste all this time going that route when we can just call the easy person who's going to give just as good an interview and be just as good for our story as going to our big university. So I think career schools actually are better poised than community colleges to get coverage than universities that can be more difficult to deal with.
Interesting. Okay, show us an example of a bad release versus a good release. I think this is also instructive.
Well, there's a bit more to cover first.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so just these are what we always have to answer for any story: the who, what, when, where, why, sometimes how. The why is always the most important and usually the hardest question to answer. And usually when we're doing interviews, what happened, we might get someone to answer that in an interview question, obviously. But the why is the key critical thing. Why is this important? Why does this matter? So those are things to ask yourself when you're thinking of coverage. Why should people care? Why does this matter? Why is this important? What does this mean? Those are the big questions to think about, not the logistics of, okay, it happened at 5 yesterday morning and it was on this street. Those are just the little details that don't really matter. But the why, how are really important. So for media releases, forget what you learned. Essay writing, putting all the important information at the end or in the middle. You want the inverted triangle. That's what we talk about in journalism, the inverted pyramid, where all the important stuff is at the top, all the key interesting stuff in that first paragraph. So if people only read the first paragraph, and in our current world, people have short attention spans. So this is more important than ever, because a lot of times people only read the first paragraph, and if it doesn't grip them, they're not going to keep going. You don't want to have the good stuff down lower. You can add additional extra stuff down lower that if people are interested and keep reading, they'll get to. But this is how we write news stories. So all the important stuff at the top, and then we go down to the less important stuff, which is not as important. So make sure you have the key stuff at the beginning when you're writing a media release, and then write in plain English. Write like you would speak, and pretend you're talking to a 10-year-old or writing this for a 10-year-old, just so that it's really accessible and clear. People use lots of extra words. AI is really bad for this. I joke that I feel like AI gets paid by the word, because something they could do in one sentence, the AI writing will be this long, and we don't have the time to go through that. We don't want to go through that. We don't want all these extra words that mean nothing. Just the facts, man. Like, just keep it very concise and clear. Don't try to impress us with your vocabulary. Again, this is more an issue, I think, with the universities that I've worked with and done media training for, where they get into their specific field and use lots of jargon and terminology that people don't understand. So if you're going to use a term that people might not know, make sure you're explaining it in that release as well. But know your message, really put effort into that headline. That headline is so crucial, because that will often determine, like when you're swiping, watching videos online, the first frame, is that going to interest me? Text on the screen, is that going to make me want to watch this video? So that's what the headline is like. Just like a subject line of an email is like that. It's really the most critical thing, the headline and the subject line, and really that, why does it matter? That was the question I asked almost on any story I went on. It could be plus, it could be a drug cartel, like whoever I was interviewing about what they were doing to combat drug trafficking. Why does it matter? Like, why are you doing this? And why is this program going to be better than other programs?
Yeah,
Why it matters.
It's very similar to advertising, like the same principles, right? Like it's a battle for attention, and you've got literally like a blink of an eye.
Yeah. So keep it short and simple too. We don't need a press release. If we want more info, we can get it in the interview. Shorter is better, just a couple paragraphs. And then use quotes as well, especially for papers and those community papers that are really short-staffed. If you provide quotes from your expert or your program head or someone from your school and a student, ideally as well in that release, they don't actually necessarily have to call you. It's not great journalism, but and for web as well, our web team will often just take the quote out of the release instead of phoning up and getting more information if it's not a contentious issue. If it's not something that's really controversial or contentious, that's different, obviously, because we're not going to just take what you say at face value. We're going to want to ask more about it. But if it's something that's not contentious or positive news, yes, we're going to use that quote you provide, and it makes it much more likely. It's really easy to turn around that story online. We'll rewrite it from a release and include the quotes you put in that story. So this is an example of an actual release, well, not a full release, but this is an example from when I worked at a university in Australia, the University of South Australia, and it was a world-renowned sleep lab, and they had this big breakthrough that was groundbreaking and got headlines eventually, but not because of this. So this is what they initially brought to me. I've edited it down a little bit, but reading this, it really doesn't sound very exciting. It's not till the very end where it says this research result is quite shocking. Well, let's go with the shocking off the top. So I turned it into a media release, and the title was "Driving Tired is Worse Than Driving Drunk." And that's what their research uncovered. So you're more dangerous on the road if you're tired than if you've had a few drinks and are above the blood alcohol level for your area, which is crazy because so many people drive tired and don't even think about it. So I tweaked it, we sent it out, we had coverage in all the morning shows, all across. They received national coverage as well as just local coverage in the state they were in. So that's a good example of just drilling it down to that headline. What's going to grab someone's attention, but still be true. Like you can't make up the headline and make it, exaggerate it. We have had people do that where they've completely exaggerated or told us something that's not true. And then we're never going to talk to you again if you do that, because if we go with that and we haven't been able to determine that it wasn't true, we look really bad, and that affects our credibility. So please make sure, make it exciting, but make it true. Radio.
Sure, but exciting, just quickly on this point though, like exciting is just like the mental filters. Okay, what's interesting in this, right? Like what's the thing that, like, it's really an advertising principle, or it's a human engagement principle, right? Because you're in the business of entertaining, informing, and delighting people, right? That's your job under tremendous time constraints, right? Or capacity constraints. So even on the community newspaper, like those journalists just writing articles off press releases, well, they might have to write, I don't know, 5-10 articles a day. Like what's the expectation now for?
Well, it varies by area, but yes, they're not just doing one story, they're doing multiple stories. Our web team will write 5 to 8 stories a day per person, depending on the day and how in-depth the story is. In some markets, TV journalists will do more than one story a day. So the smaller markets in particular, they might have to do their story, go shoot something else that's happening that the anchor will just run viz in a clip of. Sometimes people have had to shoot 2 stories in one day. So it's tighter than it's ever been. So if you take one thing away from this, is do whatever you can to proactively reach out and make a journalist's job easier, and you're much more likely to get coverage, and they'll think of you. We have set people we call all the time because they're great. If a story falls through, I'm like, oh, why don't I call? I know she'll be able to help me. And that's the person who's going to get the coverage. So there's people who are frequently appear on our newscast because they're just easy to deal with and give good value in terms of their clips and what they can do for our story.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I just went back to that in case.
No, it's great. That's great. And so, and now radio, is that an opportunity? Like there's certainly all markets have a local radio stations.
Yeah, radio, those yeah, even the smallest market usually has a radio station, and they have hours and hours to fill, especially on morning shows. So the lighter stuff, the human interest, the bizarre stuff, that's the way to get coverage. Go on the radio, talk about that. The things that are less heavy and less hard news, although they have news obviously in radio as well. They tend to be very short, but and you're less likely to get human interest story coverage in news unless it's something that really affects people and it's really interesting. A few years ago, I wear a sleeveless dress a lot in the studio because it's heated in our studio. So I had a sleeveless dress on. I thought I looked nice. It was tailored. And I had an email from a viewer who said, your dress is almost upsetting. How dare you show your arms? Which, in this decade seemed very odd. Yeah. So I had enough of it because we get lots of emails on our appearance and what we wear. And so I decided to start calling out people who do that in the hopes that, not with their name, but that it would stop. So I screenshotted her email, crossed out her name, photo of my dress, and like, do you find my dress almost upsetting? Well, it went viral. It had over 750,000 views online and comments, and it got picked up by news outlets. So I got interviewed by our local radio stations because that made good morning content to talk about, how come there was a news anchor in Australia who wore the same suit every day for a year. Nobody noticed. He did it on purpose because of his female co-anchors constantly getting emails about what they were wearing. So that's just an example of the kind of morning talk show stuff that can be interesting. And if you can think of a way something you're doing would work for that, you don't have to wear a sleeveless dress to get coverage. But radio is a great way to reach a lot of people. They're driving to work, they're commuting. So tips for radio, if you haven't done it before, you can ask to pre-record. That's very common in radio. So that's a good way to, if you're nervous, know that, okay, it's recorded. Worst case scenario, we can start again, or they can edit it until you get a little more experience. If you're nervous about doing that, smile when you talk. If it's something positive, I do a lot of voiceovers in my line of work. And so if it's something happy or positive, I always smile when I voice it because that comes through in your voice. It adds warmth. If it's something more serious, obviously adjust your tone accordingly, but you still want to have warmth and sound like you're an approachable person, that people are more likely to listen to you if you sound like you have warmth and are approachable, and an even pace. So not too fast, but I'm trying to get it all out. But then also I'm not going to speak very, very slowly because you're just sitting, listening to that going, oh my God, spit it out. And if you have a word you use over and over, be aware of that. Certain people have sort of crutch words. So you could just record yourself with your phone, practice answering questions, and then see, I didn't realize. We have a lot of people tell us, I didn't realize I said so much, or I didn't realize I said a certain word so many times. So then that's something to be aware of as well, because that can be distracting to your message. And you never want anything that distracts from what you're saying. So for both radio and TV, know what you want to say. I've had people show up with notes and think, I can just read off the notes. It's not going to come across as genuine if you do that. And for TV, it's going to look terrible. And if you're trying to remember what you wanted to say, you're not really listening to the question and answering the question. I always tell people, you know what you're talking about. You're an expert in whatever we're talking to you about. I'm not going to ask you about the Middle East crisis. I'm not going to ask you a hard question that you don't know the answer to, usually. So just know that. You know what you do and you know your stuff. So just answer the questions you're asked about that. And obviously think about what you'd like to say and key points you want to hit. But I think bullet point in prep is way better than trying to write up full sentences and then try to remember, what was that sentence I wanted to say, because it will never come across well and the interview won't be as good. Talk like a real person, just like you should write like a real person, speak in plain English, use contractions, speak really easily. Most viewers, and for not the big papers, but community papers, the average reading level could be like a grade 5 to 7 reading level, believe it or not. So think about how you would explain it to a 10 to 12-year-old or your neighbor, just to keep it simple. Obviously, avoid jargon. If you have to use a technical term, and we are seeing technical terms being used more, just explain it. So find an easy way to explain that technical term so people know what you mean. And then keep it short and sweet. For TV, it's usually like an 8 to 15-second clip max. We might use more than one interview clip from you, but they're short answers, and try to avoid going off on tangents. You people will start an answer, it'll be like, oh, this is a great clip. And then they go off on this tangent, but then they never come back and finish their thought. So if it's a pre-recorded interview and not live, which most are, we can edit out that ramble you just did, but not if you don't finish your thought. So just try to keep it short and concise.
And a lot of your time, just for context, so if you've interviewed somebody, you've got, once you hear that 10-second clip, you're like, oh, good, I've got it. I don't need to keep going.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So sorry, I was just going to say, I've done this for so long. I hear the clip when they say it, and I'll be ticking off in my head, okay, I need a clip on this, a clip on this. Great. Boom, boom, done. So unless it's something really controversial or contentious, unless we're trying to get a politician who has done something wrong, we'll keep hammering them to get an answer out of them or to get more information. But if we're doing a story on something good that's happening or interesting, we're not going to keep hammering you once we have a good, don't hammer you usually, but once we have a good clip, we're like, okay, great, I'm done. So if it's a short, usually if I have a short interview, that means it was a really good interview because I got everything I needed in like 3 minutes. Sometimes it'll take 10 minutes of interviewing someone just to be like, okay, I'm 7 minutes in and I still don't have a usable clip. So I have to keep going to get that clip. And then
which
we're
then
less
creates,
likely to interview that person again.
well, that's it. That which creates more work for you because now you got to go through 10 minutes of interviews to find the little 10 seconds that you need. And it's a pain. And then that person you're less likely to want to talk to. So a short interview with a journalist is a positive indicator.
Yeah, right? I think it is. I tell people that because they're like, oh, was that okay? That was so quick. I'm like, no, that means it was good because I got what I needed. The very rare case, it'll be so terrible by about 3 minutes in, we'll realize we're not going to get anything out of this person. But that's very unlikely. That's more if we're trying to get interviews on the street with people where you're like, okay, I'll try. I've learned to just stop once it's clear they're not going to answer anything. But that's not usually a interview we've set up. That's just us sort of, we call them streeters, where we're like, hey, what do you think about this? And we'll bail on those pretty quickly if it's bad.
Yeah. Right.
That's different though. Obviously, and ahs. So as I mentioned, practice, you can record yourself just to see how you sound, which helps. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't like the sound of my voice. But if you smile and if you think about how you're speaking, that can really help, and be as natural as possible. So if you talk with your hands, like I do, talk with your hands when you're doing that interview. Because if you're trying to, okay, I'm going to hold my hands and not, it's going to feel very uncomfortable and not natural for you. So you want to speak with your hands. Just if it's TV, don't be flailing in front of your face, obviously, but use that. Be as natural as possible. And then obviously always be polite and friendly. It's professional, but it also makes you more likable. And the fact of life, if you're more likable, people are more likely to listen to you and hear your message. And for TV, you're in my living room. So it's visual. You need to think about, well, okay, what am I going to wear? It's not just words, it's also pictures. So we need the visuals to go along with it. A lot of college programs and career school programs have very visual things we could see. So think about those programs. That would be a great way to get some coverage if you can have a good angle on a story there, and personalizing that story. So having students and picking in advance, like whether it's asking the instructors or professors, okay, what students do you have would be really good at outgoing and would be good at this, and pre-selecting those people so that you have a student or two set up as well as somebody else, which makes everything easier, and then video of them doing something. So how you look does matter on the TV side of things, and then for photos, for print as well. Radio doesn't matter at all. So people like radio for that reason. They can do an interview in their pajamas.
Sure, but radio is an auditory medium, right? So if there's I don't know, the sound of a welder or hammering or some like that, that tells the story.
Yeah. So radio, it's nice to have that for radio. And then obviously if you're just doing an interview for radio, you need to be in a quiet environment like I am in now. If you're in a really noisy environment, that's going to make an interview harder. So depending where you are, if someone calls you and maybe you're downtown or there's a lot of noise around you and you're not by your office, you can always do it in your car, because it's kind of like a little sound booth. Especially during COVID, I would get these last minute emails. Can you voice this commercial? Can you voice this for us? So I would do it in my car because it was quiet. For really good sound, I actually put a blanket over my head to voice for content that was going to air on our station. But I've done it in hotel rooms as well. If the hotel room's noisy because of air conditioning, you can put a sheet or towel over your head. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. But normally it's just having a quiet environment. But a car is a good tip if you don't have anything quiet around where you are. And then if it is on TV, and even for print, for those photos, make sure what you're wearing fits what you're doing. So it looks silly to see someone in a suit if they're on a farm. It looks silly to see someone really, really casual in an office setting or a serious setting. And then color as well. People tend to wear black a lot. Black doesn't look great on TV, and it's not really flattering for most people either. So color is good for TV, but avoid busy patterns and stripes. Normal stripes are fine, but if they're really tight stripes and busy patterns, they actually sort of vibrate on air. We call it the zebra effect. So they pulsate and they really don't look good. But busy patterns in general don't look great on TV. Pick solid colors. Blue is a great color. Our veins are blue. Everybody looks good in blue, and it's a great TV color because the camera picks it up the best. But really, any nice color works so well for TV, and it'll make you look better as well on TV. Often for TV interviews, it's just waist up for the interview part, but then we might zoom out for a wide shot, or if we have you doing something interactive, which is ideal, then we'll see the rest of what you're wearing. And do a mirror check beforehand. Just check your hair. Don't assume they're going to tell you if your hair is sticking out. My cameramen often don't tell me if my hair is sticking out, which drives me nuts. But could you please tell me if it's sticking out over here? Because we're outside. So just do a quick check beforehand. Okay, and usually you're never looking at the camera unless you're doing a live interview with someone at a different location, like what you'd see on the news network. That's when you look at the camera. But if you have a reporter there or even a camera person interviewing you on his own for a reporter, you're going to look at the reporter or pretend to look beside the camera where the camera person or reporter would be standing. So it helps you forget the camera's there, actually, because then you're not looking at the camera. You're looking at the person. You're just explaining it to them. It's much more natural. And don't look around because it makes it look shifty. If you're looking back and forth between the camera and the person, it looks a little bit shifty. Those are just good tips there. And don't try to hold or grab the microphone unless someone asks you to, which is very unusual that someone would ask you to hold their microphone. And there's also mics that they can clip on you that also you forget the mics there altogether, which makes it much more natural. And if you have to do any kind of show and tell to demonstrate something, having one of those clip-on lav mics are great. It really helps. So obviously you can offer a viewpoint, but if you don't know the answer to a question, don't try to bluff your way through or make something up. That can go very, very wrong. An example I was doing media training in Australia, and they were working with pilots on fatigue risk management. And one of the lead researchers, I was practicing with him. And so I forget the question I'd asked, but he said, I said, well, if your pilot's tired, he's like, well, we have two pilots in the cockpit. So the answer was that was going to help. And I said, well, what if both pilots fall asleep? And he quipped, thinking he was being funny, well, you better hope the flight attendant can fly the plane. But of course, that clip is what's going to get picked up or go viral for all the wrong reasons. So if you don't have an answer to a question, don't try to make one up or try to be funny unless it's a light-hearted story that being funny would work for. Otherwise, just say, I'll have to get back to you with that information. We're never going to use a clip of someone saying, I'll have to get back to you, or I'll have to check on that and get back to you. That's never a clip we're going to use. But if you try to bluff your way through and you're wrong, we may not know you're wrong, and that clip gets used, and then it affects your credibility and our credibility. This I don't see happening with schools much, but always try to keep your cool, even if you're ambushed. It makes great TV. When I go up to someone to ask them a question, they start screaming at me and running away. That's really good TV. Not so good for the person who's doing that and their reputation. I don't really see that being much of an issue for schools, but just always sort of keep cool and keep calm. And don't try to tell a reporter how to do their job. It's really annoying when people try to tell us how to do our job. We don't try to tell you how to do your job. And remember, with TV in particular, unless you have a really good relationship with that reporter, nothing's off the record. So don't say anything with a mic on or with a mic nearby that you don't want to be broadcast, because some reporters will use that, even if they've told you it's off the record. But if you have a really good relationship with a reporter, and that's why it's important to build that. I have people tell me things off the record, and I don't want to burn that source, so I keep it off the record, but it helps me know where to go in my research or investigation of the story. Deadlines, as I mentioned, are usually same day, so please meet those deadlines and don't make promises you can't keep. If you get a call in the morning, don't say yes unless you can make that happen, because that can put us in a really bad situation. But try to say yes and just make it happen, make it work. And think of those visuals, think of those action shots for newspaper photos as well as TV stories. And it's also good if someone calls you up to some background and they don't want to do an interview. We're trying to get some information on something to provide that, because then you're being helpful, and you might not get anything out of it, but in the long run, it helps build that relationship with the journalist. And building those strong media contacts really helps, but don't bother us with every little thing that isn't important. Try to think of the stories you see on the news or you see in your community paper and think, like, what would people care about? What matters? What's making a difference? What's interesting? And go from there. We don't need to be bombarded with every little meeting or event or thing. But if you have a big politician coming to campus or something super interesting, yeah, that's a story. The mayor coming to your school, especially if you're in a bigger city, we really don't care about that. Obviously, treat journalists with respect. That's important. And usually we'll never show you a story before it's printed. So don't ask if you can see it. Some people will say, could I see it for fact checking? And if it's a more technical story, then there have been times where I said, okay, here, can you take a look at this to make sure I've got this right? But generally, you won't get to see the story beforehand or fact check it.
Okay. Let's pause here for a sec. So we've got 9 minutes. And there's one more thing you're going to share, how to always look good online. But if anyone has any questions, now would be the time to put them in the chat while Tess finishes up the last little bit of the presentation. Super interesting so far. Yeah. So, okay. So this is, you always look good. Here's another thing I've learned since I've been with Tess, is that I'm not photogenic and she's extremely photogenic. In every photo of us, I look like a troll and you look beautiful and radiant. So how do you help all of us regular folks always look good?
Well, lighting is your friend. Lighting helps, and you don't actually have to have light. Natural light is your friend. I'm going to show you an example of that in a second, but I wanted to talk about the reporter technology, so you can become your own reporter for your schools, or students can even become reporters for schools. I actually created a program for Special Olympics where we had Special Olympic athletes become athlete reporters, because we couldn't get out to all the events to get coverage for them. So they would go to events where their friends were at, and they would take video, do a little interview, and they did it all with their phones or iPads. And we taught them how to do it in a way that looked professional, sounded good, and that's something that schools can do very easily on social media. To add to social media content, add to website content, those testimonials, how's this program changed your life? What did you love about it? Those open-ended questions can get really, really good answers. So all you need is a phone, and then you need to think about what platform you're on. So if it's on obviously TikTok or Instagram, your phone needs to be vertical, because that's how all the videos are. For news, we hate vertical videos because a TV screen is this length, and so if a vertical video means black bars on either side of it. But if you're shooting for those platforms, so do a vertical video. Sometimes you might have to shoot it both ways. We do that for our pet segment for social media. We'll shoot this way for a Facebook that's not a Facebook story, just a Facebook post video, and content for the newscast we'll shoot on phones, believe it or not, this way. It just has to be horizontal for those platforms, otherwise vertical video. And then think about your lighting and your backdrop. People often will put something very bright behind them. So a window is a really good example of that. So if the window's behind you, it's very pretty. I have trees outside my window, but it's very bright there. So if I put my face back to the window, then my face is going to be much darker and it's going to be blown out behind me. So here's a really good example of that. This photo is in exactly the same location. This was at a conference I was doing athlete reporter and media training at. So bad lighting is the windows behind me. I look terrible. And then I just spun around. So all that nice natural window light is coming in, lighting me like I have professional lighting, and I look completely different. But looking at the background, I can see a luggage cart. This was in the lobby of the hotel we were at. I did this quickly to try to show an impactful example. Obviously move the luggage cart out of the way and see what's behind me. Do I have a light coming out of my head? Is there a pole coming out of the student's head if you're interviewing a student? Just think about those nice backdrops. And then inside, ring lights. There's lots of easy, cheap lighting now. It's easier than ever. You can even get little lav mics online that work with phones, and they're super easy and not very expensive on Amazon, which is a good idea to do. If you're interviewing someone with your phone, they kind of have to be within 1 to 2 feet of you for the audio to be good. And if there's background noise, that's even more important. They're closer. Once you get farther away from that, you've probably seen it with social media videos. The person gets quieter. You can't really hear them. Or if they turn away and the phone's here, all of a sudden you can't hear what they're saying because they're away from the phone mic. So investing in those little mics, very inexpensive. They give you broadcast quality results. They just clip on and they're really easy to use. We actually use them with my phone to shoot our pet segment. We started shooting in my backyard during COVID, and then we found the dogs and kittens and animals were better outside. It was less scary than coming into the studio with all the lights. So we still shoot this pet segment outside, and my cameraman found that they were scared of the camera, but my phone they were fine with, and we were already using the phone for social media. So we now actually shoot 5-minute segment on my phone every week. And it looks great, and no one would know we shot it on my phone. But that backdrop is key, and lighting is key.
Interesting. Okay. If you advance, I think there's a QR code. So we have a summary of this chat, a kind of a tips and tricks document that will help you. Oh, good. It's also been put in the webinar chat. You can just download this PDF that Tess was kind enough to allow us to reprint. Tess, just, I guess we've got 1 or 2 minutes. Can you think of what's an event or a thing that would had a chance of attracting attention, right? So would, I don't know, a blood drive, a Coats for Kids, winter something, Christmas fundraise, like what kind of stuff would be interesting?
Yeah, I think if your school is doing a coat drive in winter, especially now people are really feeling the pinch with inflation, people are struggling more than ever. So that story will probably resonate. If students in schools are giving back to help those less fortunate with the coat drive or a blood drive, those are all visual things. Or if you see people bringing coats in and stacking them and people giving blood. If you're launching a new program, especially if it's a program that's addressing a skills shortage in your area, that's a great way to get coverage. So you can invite media in to see whatever the program is, have something interesting and visual that you can demonstrate, have students potentially that have signed up for the program or that are interested in the program. That would be good. There's a lot, thinking about those things that, would my neighbor care about this? Is this interesting? Does this matter to people outside just our small school community? Is it of interest to the broader community?
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. Well, hey, listen, thank you so much. I appreciate you helping me on this. And I look forward to your notes on my presentation skills after. Folks, appreciate your time. Thank you. Please click on the link or QR coded here, and you can get kind of a summary of this. And thank you very much for attending the webinar, and we look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Thanks.